Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 45. We've been doing these a long time now. Before I introduce our guests, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune, which gives people a chance to come in and all this kind of stuff. Okay, that was, of course, Heart of Oak, which is the official march of the Royal Navy, and also, I believe, the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal New Zealand Navy. It used to be the official march of the Royal Australian Navy, but it's been replaced by something else now. I think it's called Royal Australian Navy, originally enough. And it was from the excellent channel Patriotic Archive. Okay, let's introduce the guests for the day. And I'll start with Alaman. How are you going, Alaman?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
Yeah, not at all bad. And another one of our regulars, Ozzy. How are you going, Ozzy?
I'm doing very well. There's some noise at the moment because I'm making a drink, but yeah. But it should be done in a second. I'm doing very well, though. Thank you.
No worries at all. And also, John. How are you going, John?
Good evening. Very well, thank you.
All right. As always with these Splendid Isolation streams, I tend to start them off by just asking each guest in turn if they have a particular subject they'd like to bring up, which can be anything from the news or even not from the news. Let's start with the chap who hasn't streamed with us much first. So we'll start with John. John, anything in particular you'd like to bring up? Or you can go last.
Hoping to go last. I need to think of something.
All right, you go last. Adam, go on, mate. You got anything you'd like to bring up to start with?
Yeah, it's probably kind of old news to most people now. But has anyone seen this this clip on GB News of Starkey talking about Black History Month?
I haven't. I wish I had. Can you DM it to me, please, at some stage? Because I'll certainly watch it after the show.
But essentially, he first off goes on about Mary Seacole. You know, the sort of common myth about that.
Yep.
And he kind of blows that out quite succinctly. He does kind of. I think he's kind of trying to take this sort of middle ground. He says, oh, you know, you do still need a Black History Month. There's, you know, you need to give these people some sort of identity. There's a good number of them here. Blah blah blah. Which is, you know, I mean, the issue with that, I suppose, is that he's giving them far more ground than they would ever give him. So,
I don't understand personally why we don't just celebrate British history, of which, you know, there is a chunk of it that involves Black people. Why can't it be included? Why can't it be included under the umbrella of British history?
Yeah, because
Go on, Gus, go on.
they won't like their position in that story.
True.
To be honest,
no, hold on. So it various parts of Africa have been involved in the empire and in the Commonwealth, and that's and as a result, black people. There are black people that have contributed to the various different successes of our nation in modern times, admittedly.
okay, but
why can't we celebrate that as part of a broader British history?
Here's the thing, though. Like the problem with that, and the reason why they wouldn't accept it, and like if I was of that persuasion, I wouldn't accept it, is because
this gets to the fundamental part of the problem,
it's
isn't
a
it?
position of frustration.
They live here, but they don't consider themselves British. So why are they here?
Yeah, I think John has got a good point there. I think
that's a conversation you can have, but it's sort of relatively aside to the sort of version of the topic they'll accept.
If they want to be British, and they are British subjects, and because of the empire and its consequences, we do have British subjects that are, African descended, then they should have their part in British history, but they shouldn't be treated as a separate part. We don't have an English history month or we probably have a Welsh and Irish history month. Goodness knows, I'm sure we do, but we shouldn't.
I don't know. I think both of you chaps are actually fairly. You both have a reasonably based take on this, but to me, what gets on my nerves is every time I go to a website like the he'll be back hopefully. There he is. Every time I go to something like the British National Army Museum website, I will find a disproportionate amount of information about Black British soldiers who were always a tiny minority.
Oh yes, it's almost as if they fought, World War I on their own or something.
Yeah, when in fact, there were virtually no Black British soldiers in World War One.
Yeah,
actual British soldiers as opposed to Empire soldiers.
I assume everyone here saw the movie 1917.
Well, that was an interesting one because, of course, the Sikh regiments were moved off of the front by that. They were moved to more preferable climes by that point.
I just remember I sat down and watched it, and I was thinking at the start, this is really good. This is actually an astounding piece of filmography. And then as time went on, you just slowly started to see things that just obviously would not be there. And then they get into the truck with like an Indian, like a Scotsman and an Englishman.
He would not have been there. He would have been in his own unit.
And then towards the end of the movie, things started to get really out of hand because you started to see, sort of West Africans in British Army uniform in with the regulars. And like, for me, and I remember seeing lots of people say this is a really great British film that represents history as it was. And my thought was just sort of like, it could have been, but I lost my immersion halfway through.
All the way through that film, and I agree, it's a good film. It's made very well. But if you watch it all the way through, there are Indian people and let's say not Anglo-Celtic people in British Army uniforms. If you watch it carefully, and you're supposed to not notice them, I think, but I certainly did.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, I remember talking to my dad, who's a relatively, his politics are relatively anodyne, while we were watching the film, and he was just like, "Well, that immediately ruins my immersion." And like it's quite obvious to just like normal people that there's something going on that shouldn't be happening.
Well, this is the point Lawrence Fox made. It's very jarring. And if you know any history, you know that yes, there were Sikhs on the Western Front at a point in time. But if you look at the dates, I think they were removed something like 4 to 6 months before the events that are portrayed in the film.
Yeah, most of them were redeployed to the Middle East.
Well,
yes,
I mean, I would consider that a relatively like I mean, if you're just trying to give like this is what World War One's meant to be like, I'm relatively aside from that. Like, even if they had like a moment in which like the two boys are going through like a Sikh regiment, that would be fine for me because that
Yeah.
was historic.
Yeah,
But it's what you call the sparsity and the jottedness of it all that just completely just sort of snapped me out of it. It was a real shame.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that at all. Adam, what's your views on 1917?
I actually haven't seen it. I keep meaning to,
okay.
but I haven't watched it yet.
It's a good film. Don't get us wrong. It is a good film. But if you watch carefully the people who are in British Army uniforms, there are a lot of them who most certainly would not have been in the British Army in 1917.
Yeah, but I mean, this is how they get you, isn't it? Like, I'm quite a big fan of Dune, and they've just done a Dune movie, and I haven't watched it yet. I'm not sure if I even will. But you've even got people like Morgoth going, "Oh yeah, it's all right. They've got a bit of diversity in there, but it's not that bad." And I think, well, this is how they get you. It's it's they push it down the road a bit. Yeah,
a little bit at a time. I agree totally.
Yeah,
See,
I mean, they did it. They've yeah, go on, John.
When it's in a fantasy universe, and if you can believe they've genuinely picked the best actor for the role, it wouldn't bother me. But it's that there's always that kind of thought in your mind of like, is that the token, or were they generally the best person that applied on the day? And I'd feel pretty insulted if I was a minority and that was what I knew people were thinking about me.
Well, you had what's his name? The Black Supreme Court Justice in America.
Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas, yeah, he famously tells a story about how he used to put a 50-cent sticker from a pack of tobacco or cigarettes on his diploma because there was affirmative action sweeping through the unis at the time, and he felt that in the eyes of his potential employers, it made his degree worthless.
Yes.
Just from the chat, Momo Kyo is saying the movie Dunkirk was attacked by the usual suspects for whitewashing history, which, of course, again, nonsense. The British Expeditionary Force in 1940 would have been something like 99.94% white.
You're forgetting the fleet of canoes from Cape Town.
Yeah. I mean, my objection to that movie is that it doesn't show much of the Royal Navy. That's my objection to that movie.
In that film, there was actually there was a colonial regiment. It was a French colonial regiment, I believe, and so like, I'm not even sure that's historic. I mean, in many ways, I'm not really that bothered by it, but like, I mean, my personal problems with that film came from I'm kind of an air geek, and the air combat was not very realistic. But overall, I mean, I thought it was a fine flick. It was quite experimental. It was quite experimental. I think Christopher Nolan is probably the best British director out at the moment.
I thought it was all right, Ozzy, but like I said, it didn't show virtually anything of the Royal Navy, who actually did most of the real rescuing.
Well, yeah, the sea component was like from a civilian's point of view, which is.
Yeah, but you didn't even get to see warships. I think there was one warship in it, which was ridiculously modern for a 1940s.
It was a French destroyer from the 60s. I remember them talking about
Belgian, I think, actually. But
they were saying, but they mentioned how they were really struggling. Like, because Christopher Nolan is quite famously a very anti-CGI director.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah,
and so he likes to do everything by practical effects. And unfortunately, they couldn't actually find any seaworthy historic warships. And like the other thing that you would have noticed is that on the beaches there's like no one there. When I'm pretty sure Dunkirk at the time, you're cramping 338,000 men onto
would have been packed.
It would have been absolutely but
absolutely packed. I mean, I agree with Max Ernst in the chat, who says that he prefers the John Mills film. So do I. I prefer John Mills's Dunkirk to the more recent one. I think it's a much better film.
Yeah, it's a good film. It's not, but yeah.
I mean, they've done this. I mean, they love to do this with the two wars, specifically those two wars. They don't. I mean, they do this quite heavily in gaming. Like the last, I think the last two Battlefield games. When I was growing up, right, I kind of showing off my cringe side now. I think I owned every Battlefield game at some point or another.
Are you
And
talking about Battlefield 1 now, where it felt like every other character you played was a coloured chap?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a guy. I'm pretty sure he's not everyone's cup of tea in these circles, but there's a guy called American Krogan who got booted off of YouTube some time ago. Yeah, I mean, he did a video about Battlefield 1, and yeah, some of the inaccuracies in there are specifically ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't need a sort of a wignat like him to go into it specifically. It's pretty on your nose in places.
Let's. I guess something from the chat here, guys. Mitch is pointing out he liked the soundtrack for Dunkirk. 1917 had plot holes, and he really disliked how they relied on two guys conveying a message when they could have used the carrier pigeon.
Freudian slip.
Well, yeah, they could also, in fact, have used the Royal Flying Corps aircraft and dropped a message, which they very often did. They used to have these metal containers with big, really highly coloured streamers on them that they used to drop to troops. And they could have done that too. So, you know, there were some things in that movie which were a bit silly, I have to say.
Yeah, but it wasn't. The point wasn't really to be like fully sort of. This is like, you know, this is a military logistics film. It's just to basically show what it was possibly like. I mean, of course, one of the other things that was a big problem was the city, because
that bit felt very ridiculous.
Somehow he managed to end up behind enemy lines in a city, and then he managed to cross enemy lines, and this is the First World War. It's quite famous that crossing enemy lines was almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to remember the background to that is when the Germans withdrew to the I can't even remember what it's called now, but they pre-prepared this massively strong line, and they deliberately withdrew to it, which meant that they then overlooked the Brits again, or the Brits, Canadians, and Australians at that stage, and they withdrew to this line, and that was what was going on there. But yeah, there are certainly plot holes in it for sure. All right, so who did I ask? Was that you, Alan?
Yeah, that was me.
Is there anything else you wanted to bring up along those lines?
Well, yeah. I mean, the only thing I'd say at the end is that because that original David Starkey clip that started this whole discussion, I watched it somewhere else, and then I watched it on as a highlight on the Lotus Eaters. And I mean, they brought up something that of course David Starkey missed, which was that the reason they would want to sort of venerate someone like Mary Seacole rather than an NHS doctor from the 50s or an NHS nurse from the 50s, sorry, is probably because they're trying to push this idea, aren't they, of diversity's always been with us. It's always been here.
I mean, and also, of course, they try and ignore Florence Nightingale, who was actually the original sort of originator of that kind of stuff, really.
Yeah.
They did the same in London recently, where they released like a London Underground map where they changed the tube station names to sort of black people who you know were supposedly quite important and had were known in Britain or I don't know what quite the criteria was, but it was quite funny because if you looked up some of the names, you found some pretty distasteful people.
Yeah, when
fraudsters, murderers.
Yeah, when I take a trip from if I have to take a trip to London from Fair Isle, one of the things that I always notice if you get off at King's Cross is that they always mention the staff members who are, obviously not British. And,
it's almost as if there is an agenda that is being pushed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always a mini culture shock for me doing that because I spend a lot of my time in the Netherlands of rural Scotland, and then I come into the belly of the beast, and it's just a huge jar for me. But yeah, that's always
It's also very strange that in the most multicultural city in the UK, they feel the need to project people that are multicultural. It's like
it's their
we
stronghold.
don't. But it's bizarre. It's not. It's like surely that's the place in the UK where you least need to do that. They don't need promotion in London. They are. I mean, the minorities are now the majority in London.
Yeah,
So,
it's the Anglo-Celtic real British people who are the minority in London and have been for some time now. And I think that's also true of Birmingham.
it is true of Birmingham. When
Probably
I was
will
born
be
there,
true of other places soon too.
when I was born in Birmingham, I think I had a 50-50 chance of being English or Indian or of some description.
Yeah. I don't know. The agenda that they're pushing is so obvious now, and they don't even try and hide it anymore. They just don't hide it at all anymore. And the trouble is that, I mean, as Adam was saying, is you get a reasonable, fairly base guy like David Starkey, and he will still give them that little bit of elbow room, which I don't think we should.
Well, I have a little bit of a problem with David Starkey, not a major one. I think he's on the money on a lot of stuff, but it's funny Atman brought him up because there's a clip of him on GB News recently talking about having been cancelled and stuff, and he's talking about,
I think there's two clips of him on GB News. He was on with Farage on one.
Farage is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, the one I was thinking of was with the other guy. So yeah, he's done two.
Brazier.
Yeah.
I think he's done 3 on there now. I think they should give him a full slot. But in the one with Farage, he's talking about being cancelled and saying that, you can only be a victim if you give them power and you respect them. And it's like, but you did give them power and you did show respect to them because you apologised.
Yeah.
For something you did nothing wrong.
Never apologise to these people ever. Is my view.
Yeah, and I mean they've still ultimately gotten the last laugh because he's still the audience that he can reach. I mean, I don't know where GB News is on viewership and stuff like that, but the audience he can reach now is much diminished. But I mean, then he got kicked out of the limelight like back in 2011, so maybe he's not that bothered.
Yeah, fair enough. Ozzy, anything you wanted to bring up particularly as a first off start of the 10?
Well, I'm a dramatic gossiper, so I want to talk about AA.
No. Well, we are actually going to do that in a little while. So if that's your thing, maybe leave that for a bit because we're not actually going to talk about AA specifically. I don't think. Well, I'm not. I mean, you can, of course. I mean, you're a grown up. You can do what you want. But I did want to speak later on about infighting on the right. So I wondered if you had anything else, Ozzy.
Anything else I might have to say?
No, maybe a local story in Scotland or something like that people haven't heard of. Anything you like, really?
Not really. If there's any Scots lads actually who want to catch up on Scottish news, actually, there's a live stream I would recommend called Scots Armour. And he basically does a weekly stream about every Sunday.
Is he a bass guy, or is he?
He's very based.
All right, man. Can you do me a favor and send me a link to that in my DMs?
Yeah, no
Thanks.
sweat.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's probably the better place to catch up on New Scotland. Okay, and apart from that, I've just been receiving annoying PMs from people. But apart from that, that should be. I don't really have anything else to add. So
no worries. Okay, John, have you thought of anything while we've been chatting?
It's something that sort of appeals to my sense of humour. So there's in the news recently in England, there's been a number of reports of women getting their drinks spiked, and today it transpires that there were 3 cases that the police investigated, and they found absolutely nothing in their blood that would indicate they've been spiked, and it's basically just the case that they're getting so smashed they can't remember anything.
Yeah, that's been going on for a while, though.
Okay,
hasn't it,
so
with English girls?
this is a, I mean, it's anecdotal for me, but I mean, so on Saturdays I go out for a ride, and on the way back, one of the people I ride with, she works in one of the clubs nearby, and she did relay that she thought that there were about 3 or 4 girls that had been spiked, and additionally, a guy had been jabbed in the neck. Like I'm not sure on the veracity of the final one, but like there have been multiple reports of like stuff happening, particularly in these parts, and I'm not. I mean, some of it will probably be false. That's true, but I'm not entirely skeptical on all of it.
Okay, but then imagine this against a backdrop. So there's 3 cases alone in England where police have done a full investigation, taken bloods, nothing to indicate any kind of spiking. Imagine this then against a backdrop of Priti Patel raising the domestic abuse, the limit on which you can make a kind of report for domestic abuse to, I can't remember what it is at present.
You
It might
mean
be
statute restraint of appeals or something like that.
something like that. It's being considerably lengthened. I think it might be 6 months at the minute, and they're lengthening it to 2 years or something. And then also factor in the fact that they want to prosecute more people for rape. You're creating a perfect storm of people that clearly can't remember what they do on a night out, and then you're saying 2 years from now you're going to be able to make a claim and have it go through the courts, and by the way, the courts are going to come down like a ton of bricks because they've got a quota to meet on rape statistics.
Yeah, no, I agree with that totally, John. I think I wouldn't want to be a young man these days, I have to say. I'm glad I'm not a young man these days. So I think every time you get involved with a woman these days who is not your wife, and maybe even if she is your wife sometimes, you are risking stuff these days. And everything, when you get involved with the legal system as a straight white man, everything is against you.
Yep.
I mean, things are set against you to an extent, but I mean, I don't think
it's a statistic that women don't seem to want equality in, because men are more likely to get a custodial sentence and a longer custodial sentence for the same crime.
Much more likely for exactly the same crime.
Sentencing gaps will always exist. I mean, this is I'm not really that bothered by. So I'm not really bothered by sort of these MRA statistics because, like, you know, I believe that societies are naturally meant to be harder on men because men can, by our very nature, do more damage.
It's not an argument I would make in the normal circumstance, but it's just interesting against the backdrop of, well, we want equal this and equal that, but not equal that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when women and men are supposed to be the same on some levels, according to feminists and the left, and also our, I don't know what you describe the so-called conservative party as these days, but they're certainly not conservative.
The left.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, Alexander Johnson is an absolute social liberal and a watermelon greenie, apparently, these days. But in the society we live in now, with all of the biases and what have you, this sort of stuff we do need to talk about, because it's, if women are the same as men, then women are the same as men, but they're certainly not. And of course, we know they're not. But they want their cake and eat it. They want to be able to eat it as well, if you see what I mean.
Yep. Yeah, not interested in deaths in the workplace, not interested in the fact that men die younger on average, not interested in custodial sentences or anything like that. Give us our STEM jobs.
Yeah. Adam, what's your view on this one, mate?
I don't know. It's a toughie. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, like, like men are more violent on average. So that's always been like their excuse for harsher sentences for men for the same sort of crimes. And I kind of get the point, even though, you know, there's something about it. I remember there being a story that particularly stuck out to me of a woman who was going to, it was one of the top, it was either Oxford or Cambridge, one of the top two. And she was, I think she was training to be a doctor or a surgeon.
Yeah, I remember this
Yes.
case. Yep.
Yeah, and she stabbed her boyfriend, I believe, and sort of
repeatedly, not once,
yeah,
repeatedly.
yeah, and avoided jail because he said that, oh, you know, she's got a promising life ahead of her. And I thought, well, I'm not really sure if you'd want that to be a surgeon. So,
Yeah,
you know,
Well, at least she's handy with a knife.
yeah.
Oh dear, that's so true. Yeah, no, I do remember that case. Oh dear. And actually, she was. They were actually trying to not get her thrown out of university, even. So,
Yeah.
if a bloke had done that, and I mean, look, of course, Ammon is correct, and John and everybody else is correct that men are more violent on average, but the vast majority of male violence is directed at other males. So,
Yeah.
you know, you're much more likely to be on the receiving end of violence as a male than a female.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't believe that if you look at the mainstream media and the government. And I mean, also, I mean, when you look at the likes of Priti Patel as Home Secretary coming out with all this stuff, oh, we're going to protect women. I mean, look, there's a number of ways they could protect women. For example, they could cut mass immigration for first-born child. That'd protect women quite a lot. So,
yeah. I mean, that's the other instance of this, which is that it's
Yeah.
used as a bit of a cope to sort of redirect, to sort of utilize anger and redirect it back at a convenient target, which is, you know, isn't just men at that point. It becomes sort of, you know, your white men.
Yeah, well, I mean, how quickly has Rotherham and all of the grooming gang scandals, which, as far as I know, I mean, yeah, there's been some prosecutions, but as far as I know, they're still going on.
Well,
but that's not in the mainstream media anymore.
Well, that's one of the funny things, isn't it? Because this Sarah Everard thing, that guy has now been through his court case, and in the same month, there was another police officer that went through a court case for being involved in one of these grooming gangs, and he was the
I remember
sort
that
of
one. He was like a sort of a poster boy, wasn't he?
Yeah, for the sort of diversity program for the police force. And you know, one of them was everyone knew the name of that guy, and the woman he killed, and in the other case, you know, no one's even heard of it. So, you know, they very much direct the attention where they want.
Yeah, again, there is such an obvious agenda which is being pushed, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, I don't know that many normies. I know, and the ones I do know are mostly online. And how stupid do you have to be before you see what's going on here? I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think for all issues outside of coronavirus, the day of the normie is over.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, I was talking to I was talking to our cleaner at our office at work on Tuesday, I believe, and you know, it took all of about 2.5 minutes for me to get her to absolutely start spurging the fuck out about Muslim immigration and stuff like that. But
immigrants hate immigration. They hate it more than the rest of us. I mean, Enoch Powell had such a huge support among immigrants.
Yeah.
Like they don't want people coming here any more than we do. They're the people they were getting away from.
Well, there is that. Yeah.
I would actually. I mean, there's evidence for that, and there's also evidence against it. I think the best evidence we have that this is overstated is where these people choose to live.
Yeah. Self-ghettoization.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but they choose to live with their family, you see.
No, they're not just their families.
I know. Yeah, they're
No.
cousins, and then they're
It-
second cousins
I
and
mean,
third cousins. Yeah.
it gets, it reaches several levels of abstraction once you reach the sort of things like, the entirety of Brixton being, something like.
There's also probably an argument for the case that the areas they tend to live tend to be more, poorer areas, and therefore they're the areas that are affordable for their
But the logic
comrades to
can
come and inhabit.
also apply.
And also the fact that they're there probably lowers the property value as well. I
Sure,
suppose.
but the logic can apply to the countryside as well. And there's plenty of jobs in the countryside. Don't let anyone gaslight you into believing otherwise.
But don't forget, the British countryside is racist. Ollie.
Yeah,
As
I
we
know,
are told
I
these
know.
days.
The literal grass and trees themselves are racist.
I know. There's hooded ghosts leaning in every tree, but but I mean that as a genuine counterpoint to I think that the statements that migrants find further immigration unpopular, I think maybe in the short term that might be true, but I don't think.
So in a I think it was a Pew Research poll shortly after Enoch Powell's speech, 45% of immigrants, which was the majority, I think it was 45% and maybe 42 or 38 opposed. So 45% were in favour of tighter controls on immigration, and I think an even bigger percent were in favour of repatriation if there was a subsidy payment to do that.
Okay, but here's the next question. Are those first generation or second generations?
Well, at the time, a lot of them would have been first generation.
They would have, exactly. Because my suspicion is that once it becomes second generation.
Well, this is my thing. My problem has never been with the first generation immigrants. The first generation immigrants are usually very happy to have left where they were, and they've come here for a purpose. It's the second generation ones that don't really feel a connection to here, don't really understand why their parents left where they left because they've never lived there and haven't understood what a shithole it is. And so they're in this quasi kind of position where they don't feel any ties to anywhere, and that kind of means that they're not interested in becoming British. They're not interested in going back to the country that their parents might be from because they don't have any association with that either, and they kind of become problems from that perspective.
I think also you've got to look at that first generation of immigrants who were here when Enoch Powell was making his speeches. His excellent speeches, by the way. Those were guys who'd come from mostly the British West Indies, and they were blokes who had grown up in the 1930s and 40s. And when I was in the army, I had a mate from Barbados in the British Army. Actually, he wasn't from Barbados. His dad was, but his dad worked for London Transport for 25 years. And did exactly what he wanted to do. When he took his money that he'd earned in the UK over that 25 years, went back to Barbados and bought a fishing boat, which is what he wanted. Which is what he wanted to do. And you know what? I didn't have great problems with that guy. And he was pretty old-fashioned. I mean, Swiddy, my mate's dad, was probably in some respects more right-wing than my dad was.
Well, yeah,
I mean, they were very culturally conservative. I think that's how you describe them.
It sort of goes back to the statement that Mr. Powell made for settlement. I stress the term for settlement. So,
Well, I mean, but what about, how do you square this up with the idea of black flight? I mean, surely people that are taking part in black flight are sort of second and third generation.
I'm unfamiliar with this concept.
Okay, so we're going to talk about him in a bit. And despite some of the bad rap, I do think he did quite a good video on this. AA did a video called White Flight, Black Flight, which was essentially him summing up a book that someone wrote about migration in and out of a certain city in America.
It doesn't begin with a D.
Detroit.
Yeah.
I think they say they don't know what the name of the place is. They keep it a secret in the.
We all know.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, I've seen this in my area. My area was overwhelmingly white, and it's very quickly. I mean, they're throwing houses up around here, left, right, and centre, and they're basically all being
My-
bought up by diverse people from London.
My grandparents' neighbourhood in Birmingham was all white in my childhood, and it was almost overnight when the first ethnic person moved in. The whole neighbourhood,
Yeah,
every time
and
a house came up for sale, the white person moved out, the Indian moved in.
yeah. So like the thing is,
sorry, Adam, carry on, mate.
oh, I was just gonna say. So in this paper in this sort of book that he's sort of summarising, the idea is that you get like a sort of a pioneer migrant from a minority group who moves into an area because it's nice, and they kind of adjust to the local sort of customs, but then they just kind of get followed by more of their own who are moving there because they're there, and it kind of kicks the whole process over again. And then the whites move out, and then the sort of more upper market blacks follow them, and so on and so forth.
It's a bit like what's happening to Mexico at the moment, isn't it? With is it Californians or Floridian? Yeah, Californians.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're spreading out, aren't they?
I was just going to say, look, I spent my very, very early years in Peckham in South London, yeah. And if you were to go to Peckham now, and in fact, if you were to go to Peckham 20 years ago, it's a mostly black area. But when I was a little kid, and so you're talking about the late 1960s, early 1970s, it was a mostly white area. There was maybe 5% West Indian kids in my school, my primary school, and all of the shops, like the greengrocers and the little local corner shops, and they were all owned by English Londoner people.
Well, we were known as a nation of shopkeepers.
Yeah, and as I say, even if you'd gone to that area 20 years ago, which I did, and never went back again afterwards, it was totally black area. You couldn't see a white person anywhere. So yeah, and how that somehow benefits Britain, I just don't get, mate. I really don't.
GDP go up.
Yeah, line go up. I get that, but I mean, even that's not really true because many of them like spend more time on the dole and social welfare than they do actually working. But you know,
That's still GDP, isn't it?
Yeah, well, kind of. If you look at it in a very strange way.
It is technically, because if a government
Consuming, I get the consuming.
Here's a very stupid thing that happens in bean counting, aka economics. If the government borrows more money because it can't get it from the citizens, that counts as towards the GDP for that year. It doesn't make sense.
I can't. I don't know that.
It makes sense in a crazy world.
Yeah, it's to do with the aggregate demand equation, but it's very dumb.
Yeah, it is.
I liked it when I found it quite amusing when they started including prostitution and drug dealing as part of the GDP statistic. So that's a mark of how far we've come.
Well, look, I know there are guys on here like Ozzy who are much better versed in economics than I am, but GDP is a shit way of measuring a country's wealth anyway, in my opinion.
Yes. I mean, even something like GDP per capita is much better than just GDP.
Here's the thing. GDP basically means the overall amount of goods and services an economy provides.
Yep.
Like in a year. And so it's obvious, you think at the start, oh, okay, well, that means that, the higher the GDP is, the more goods and services the country is providing. That's good. But here's the thing. Even GDP per capita uses mean averages, and mean averages are not going to kind of going to get statistics heavy soon. Sorry. They are not adapted to the size of the distribution. So if something's really like unequally distributed, per capita GDP may not reflect that.
What you're saying is you could basically end up with lots of people at the top, or a handful of people at the top, and lots of people at the bottom.
Yeah, you can get a Yemen sort of thing, and like, so what I've been pushing for a while, at least in my own personal circles, is that people should stop measuring GDP and instead measure the real wage, because that's an actual, like, that's tangible. Like the median real wage is tangible to the average person. But it's not popular because it's.
Well, then you start falling into the fact that a lot full-time jobs are less prominent. There's a lot more part-time jobs than I think there used to be. How do you measure that? Do you convert it to full-time, or
they're not well paid either? Let's be honest, a lot of them.
You can measure it, but the main I mean, all you need to do is you basically just take payment per hour per average per person. But that, I mean, that aside, I mean, because I don't want to get this too dull and dry, because even I get bored of economics and I have to do it for a degree. When someone says that it's good for the GDP, immediately you need to start thinking, okay, well, GDP at what cost?
Exactly.
Because GDP, if that means more goods and services, well, that either means that A, someone's working harder, or B, more resources are being extracted, or some level of or some operation between those two. And so that means that someone has to do more work, or the environment is taking its toll, or et cetera, et cetera. Be skeptical of economic arguments for anything. No less migration, of course, which often ends up building on our beautiful countryside. So,
well, I mean, look, to me, the obvious thing that you don't have to be any sort of economic genius to work out is, particularly for a relatively small landmass like the British Isles, is that if you're going to have basically unlimited, unending mass immigration, and it doesn't matter if it's coming from mainland Europe or somewhere else in the world in that sense, it is absolutely going to drive up your housing costs, whether it be mortgages or rents, whilst at the same time it's going to drive down your average wages, particularly for less skilled jobs. I mean, this, you don't have to be a genius to work this out.
Well, no, of course, and that's the calculation that a lot of businesses have made, and they know that it's far cheaper to recruit people from outside the UK than it is inside. So.
There's a YouTuber who'd actually did a response video to Royal Oak. I can't remember his name now. He's a bread tuber.
Oh, God.
And he tried to do a video where he tried to sort of debunk the idea about immigration suppressing wages, and it's hilariously pitiful. I mean, he does. There's one particular bit where he's going like, "Oh, it doesn't suppress wages. Here's a study from the Cato Institute," which I'm sure he wouldn't accept on any other argument. But then he turns around and he says, "Oh, here's another paper where the government sort of tacitly admits that the reason they allow mass immigration is because it's to stop offshoring." And I thought, well, the clue's kind of there. Why would it stop offshoring?
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, it's not like Britain produces and manufactures very much these days, because we don't. I mean, one of the things I take an interest in, because I take an interest in the Royal Navy, is the national shipbuilding policy. And the problem with the national shipbuilding policy is that we just don't build all that many ships except warships. Because we can't. We don't have the facilities, and we're much more expensive than anywhere else when we do build them. Like, Britain can't compare with South Korea, for example, in building a merchant ship. We just can't, because they pay lower wages. But one of the things you've got to look at in Britain is all those extra people are forcing up the cost of living.
Yeah, I mean, I can't actually afford one now, but I was a few years ago. I was looking at getting a boat, and I remember getting into the
Boat.
yeah,
Living the Riviera life.
yeah, and I was reading lots of stuff and going through lots of stuff, and of course my sort of political spur cap was on, and I started looking into the sort of the boating and shipping industry a bit more. And I remember coming across a particular piece in an on an archive site from a newspaper, and it was a guy who was sort of the sort of representative for the shipping industry to the government for the dockyards, and he was talking about his great mistake of not being able to persuade the government enough to invest in sort of the production of cruise liners and sort of luxury yachts and stuff like that in our old shipyards, and instead just letting them go to housing and various other things.
Well, this is apparently the argument they're using for this national flagship. Like, many people think it's going to be a Royal yacht, and it isn't. But the argument that's being used in favour of it is that it's going to help British shipyards sell small cruise ships, small specialised cruise ships, and very, very big luxury yachts. That's the argument they're using in favour of it, and maybe so. Maybe so. I don't know enough about it to say yay or nay. And I'm not against the idea of a national flagship, providing it's not just a Royal yacht. But also, I strongly suspect that the cost of that is going to come out of the Royal Navy budget, and I don't think it should.
I mean, at the end of the day, we do have to face the fact that the world has gotten smaller and things are cheaper to produce elsewhere. So we almost do, by necessity, have to be producing specialized stuff that, you know, can't necessarily be produced elsewhere because they don't have the skills or you know, the equipment necessary to produce it there.
But you still have to you still have to be able to produce your warships and this kind of stuff. You like
oh, absolutely. I think it's I have deep misgivings about employing any other countries to have anything to do with your military technology.
I didn't object to the Tide class fast tankers being built in South Korea because they were much cheaper than they would have been if they'd been built in Britain. And they are, at the end of the day, they're a Royal Fleet auxiliary ship. They're not a warship. You can stick a couple of defensive armaments on them, but they're not a warship. So I didn't really object to that. Although obviously, if you could build them in Britain at a reasonable price, that's probably okay. I don't know. I mean, that would take us onto a whole different subject about the Royal Navy being far too small and all this kind of stuff. But you definitely got to look. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and Britain as a manufacturing economy these days is like it's really bad, and has got a lot worse over the last 2 years for obvious reasons.
Well, I mean, I have I mean, I remember at the start of COVID. I mean, regardless of people's personal opinions,
let's not name the stuff that YouTube will completely ban you for if you talk about it.
Yeah. But I remember during that you know, we were dependent on imports for protection equipment and all this sort of stuff. You know, really simple stuff that you could produce on an automation line. And you know, companies would theoretically actually make more profit from staying in the country and building capital that would just build it with lower labor inputs, theoretically. But the reason they don't is because most modern companies run on short run profit margins, not long run profit margins. That's why like only Germany is like the only like net exporter in Europe. And so we're actually in this kind of unfortunate situation in which basically they could stay here if they wanted to, but they're too impatient to. And so that's sort of why your companies are leaving. It's not because, you know, they have no choice. It's just that they'd have to spend a bit more time and effort than they really want to. And,
there's a lot of red tape here that just makes things cost more than they need to.
Wasn't John? Wasn't that one of the reasons for us supposedly leaving the EU, which doesn't seem to have happened yet?
Yeah, it was.
And like, there's been no movement on that so far as I've seen, really,
Well,
to reduce the
The
over-regulation.
government passed a
if
bill.
you're
which,
charitable, you would say that they spent a lot of their first year dealing with the fallout from COVID, whether that was self-inflicted or not, or planned or not. I don't want to get into that speculation, but
well, the government made clear in its withdrawal bill that like any pre-existing EU regulation that was otherwise not mentioned in the withdrawal agreement would be kept by the British government, which just sort of begs the question, like,
Why?
yeah,
yeah. The thing is, even if a parliament says that, they can't be bound by that. So I wouldn't like.
Yeah, but they don't do it. Is the point? I mean, I see what you're saying,
No.
John, but they don't actually do it.
No, I agree, but there's two ways of looking at this. I mean, well, there's one way of looking at this. Really, we've got a crap government, but we didn't vote for that government because they were necessarily going to be good at anything else. We voted for that government because they were going to follow through with Article 50, which they've now done, and leaves us in a position to vote for a government that, or for people to be in government, because that's how we vote, who will, start to look at where we go now and consider that more thoroughly.
All right, guys, I'm gonna like shift our direction a little bit now, just for my thing I want to bring up, and then we'll get on to what's probably going to be the main subject of the stream, which is infighting on the right. But before we do that, have all you chaps seen the video that Affirmative Right put out about the recently murdered Conservative MP?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
haven't.
no.
I stuck it on your Discord, John.
Is this because he? I think I saw the title. So
Yeah,
I think
he was deeply involved with Qatar.
I was going to say the summary of the video is that basically it might not be a bog standard Islamic terror attack that we're used to seeing in the UK, and there may be more to it than that.
Yeah, because bear in mind the guy who is allegedly the murderer was the son of an ex-government minister from that shell, Somalia. But Qatar apparently are deeply involved in Somalia, and it seems that and this Conservative MP, although everything I've read about him, in most respects he seems to be a good, pretty right-wing Conservative MP, was also deeply involved in Qatar. So it might not be what like you first look at, and I've certainly not seen anywhere on the mainstream media where they've mentioned this at all.
Well, that's because they're not real journalists.
Yeah. For anyone who wants to see it on the stream, by the way, guys, it's in the video section on our Discord. So, but I also put it up in John's Discord as well. So, but to me, it was a pretty convincing argument, to be honest with you.
On that point though, anyone listening is welcome to join my Discord. So if you wanted an invite to stick in the chat or something,
mate, put it in the private chat, and I'll stick it on stick it in the chat. Because I don't have an open Discord, as you know. But if yours is open, by all means, you can put it.
Yeah. Well, I have a few tiers, and the bottom tier is kind of open to everyone. For kind of general
that's where I am at the moment. It's on the bottom tier.
Appear on my show and you'll get ranked up. That's generally how it works.
No, I'll happily appear on your show. But anyway, stick it in the private chat.
All right,
I'll put it on. I'll put it on the screen. But yeah, I found that quite convincing. If anyone wants to find it for themselves, if you look up the Affirmative Right channel on YouTube, I think it's still on there at the moment, or if not, you can go to the Affirmative Right website, which I'd recommend people to do. It's a very good website and well worth following. Colin Liddell, who runs it, was one of the original founders of the alt-right before he fell out with a lot of the supposed alt-right people now, like Spencer and Grinder Greg, etc. Which
we don't talk about those people.
We're going to in a minute. We're going to in a minute. We're going to in a minute. But yeah. Let me just check if this is on here. No, that's Aussie's one. All right, I'll wait for that to come up and then I'll have a look. But yeah, so I don't think that this was a straight up Islamic terrorist case. Let's say it that way. If that makes any sense.
So what was the argument he broadly made in the video?
Well, okay, I'm trying to summarize it. Basically, this MP, who was tragically murdered, it was heavily involved with the Qatari government, and Qatar is heavily involved in Somalia. And heavily involved, not in a good way, in pushing stuff that is kind of related to Osama bin Laden's lot.
Right.
So when you say he's involved, like
big buddies with the Emir of Qatar and that kind of stuff. Got gifts and money from those people.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, that's really what it was. I found it fairly convincing, I have to say. And like I said, I'll repeat, I think from everything I've seen, he was a pretty good Conservative MP in most respects. But I'm not sure the idea that he was just killed by a random Islamic terrorist is really true.
This is what happens when you stick your nose in the business of other countries, isn't it?
That's really the point that the affirmative right was making.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing, though, isn't it? Now with sort of our modern diversity, wars don't just happen abroad, or conflict generally just doesn't just happen abroad. It comes here too.
Yes, the insulation we enjoyed by having a relatively homogenous society, apart from the Irish, has been stripped away, isn't it? We're now exposed to the conflicts that are going on in the rest of the world, even though we may not have any overt involvement in them.
Yeah, I mean, like every time it kicks off between Palestine and Israel, you've got to have trouble on the streets somewhere.
Yeah, I remember during the Batley and Spen by-election, there was that video of that Islamic fellow who was working for George Galloway, who comes up and challenges the replacer of Joe Cox. I can't remember her name. They're all so forgettable.
Ledbetter, I think.
Yeah,
isn't it Michelle Cox's sister?
I don't know. Forgettable MP 2382. And
Joe Cox sister. Joe Cox.
Yeah, and he starts talking about Kashmir and like how it's like a really important issue for Britain. And it's like,
no, it isn't.
It
hasn't been for like 100 years.
Yep, exactly right.
I mean, I don't know what you guys talk about. I mean, I wake up every day and I think, oh God, what's happening in Kashmir? Even before, I wake up and brush my teeth, I go, what is happening in Kashmir?
The last time anyone in Britain should have cared about that was 1947.
But then they say things like, this is a matter of great importance to British Kashmiris. And I'm just like,
if you were British, you wouldn't be concerned with Kashmir, would you?
Yeah,
there's a reason you've left Kashmir.
The term is oxymoronic. There is no Kashmir in Britain. I'm sorry. It hasn't been for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there's probably more of Kashmir in Britain than there used to be in some respects. But
yes, unfortunately,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing, by the way, because as I've said repeatedly on these streams, if you don't laugh, you're going to start crying, and I don't want to spend my time crying about stuff because I don't think we should be victims.
Oh no! If you laugh at the stupidity of something, it undermines an ideology far more than outrage.
Yeah.
Because once you are outraged, you admit that something has teeth, and that's helpful sometimes, particularly if you want to name your enemy. Sun Tzu sort of stuff. But like most of the time, like you just want to make fun of it. Like you don't want to say that, like for example, with transsexuals, like you don't want to like say this is a mental illness. You just, I don't believe you. I think it's quite funny.
I mean, I've had people like say to me that the problem with streaming every week is you end up crying about stuff. Well, I never end up crying about stuff. I end up laughing about stuff quite a lot, but I don't cry about it because I'm not a victim, and I don't think most Anglo-Celtic people are victims. I think, we're a bit stronger than that, to be honest. But I do think you should call it out, and I do think you should take the piss out of it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess we're going to segue. There's a word I learned from the media. We're going to segue into one of the things. Hang on. Jonathan Bowden in the chat is saying, you do. Sorry, Duke. No, I don't, mate.
Back from the dead, back from the dead, back from the dead.
No. I like Jonathan Bowden. He's my mate. So there we go. But no, I don't do what you were saying there, mate. I laugh at it. Now, on that note, we're going to segue into what I think will carry us to the end of the stream. Is we're going to talk about infighting on the right. So punching right, people on the right arguing with each other, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to ask Atterman to start us off with his general views on that, if you don't mind.
I'm going to quote Tony Blair. I can't remember the exact quote, but he basically says he was talking about people when he first sort of was becoming leader and trying to sort of unify Labour behind him, and he said something to the effect of, what was it? He said people were saying, "Oh, you're dividing the movement or you're splitting the movement," and he said, "But to do that, you actually have to have a movement." And sort of he was making a point on the fact that a movement ultimately has to be dominated to some regard or another. You can't just all sit around at a nice round table and discuss the issue and come to some sort of agreement. Like, you're going to have different groups, and one of them's going to rise to the top, and that's ultimately going to be the way it is. But I know what you're talking about, which is this AA video where he called out the Tory boys.
Well, it's not only. To be fair, it's not only the AA video. It's also like other people's. Like, I'm not on Twitter, all right, and I don't regret not being on Twitter at all. So I miss most of this stuff. But I don't think I think AA overreacted. But one of the things I want to discuss is I don't think that Harrion was particularly good either, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't think me and Harry are like the most politically aligned. I know that he's a bit more sort of libertine, I suppose.
Exactly the same. I'm exactly the same. He's
right,
he's way to the left of me, for sure.
I wouldn't say way to the left. He when you actually talk to him on a stream, especially after or just before a stream, when it's sort of more private, he's a bit more based than he often lets on. He's quite good at the optics game. But and I mean, I think that this is also partly an extension of that. Like one of his points I saw he brought up was, I don't know if this is exactly his point. So maybe take it with a grain of salt. But I think one of his points was broadly that, like, even someone like Evola, because of his various associations, is ultimately going to land the right in sort of dark water.
Yeah, I see what is going on with that, for sure. And I think AA sometimes, what's the right word? I think he sometimes edges a bit too edgy, if that makes any sense. But I kind of see why he does that as well. But on the other hand, like, I abandoned watching AA 4+ years ago because he was too left wing. All right, he's moved a long way since then. He definitely has moved a long way since then.
But yeah, just on this though, I thought it was quite funny because I think in one of his recent streams he mentioned that he'd re-uploaded an old unpopular opinion stream, and he goes, oh, it's like episode, it's in single digits or just about in double digits. It's really far back, and he said, oh, it's me talking with this Israeli guy about anti-Semitism. And I thought that's kind of funny because that's a conversation he would not have on his streams
Now.
at all now. But
No,
yeah, I don't
no.
know.
I mean, look, I think we've got to be we've got to be honest about this, and like AA's streams are his living, along with his academic agency stuff, the courses that he sells. There is living. That's his living. That's why he streams so often. His channel is I would say dominated by Americans, more so than Brits. And like I follow AA. I'm also one of his Patreons. I give him, I don't know, 10 bucks a month or whatever it is, because I actually, when he got the sack from his university job, I felt sorry for him. And I thought, and you know, I don't like people getting the sack from university jobs because people call you racist, because I don't think AA is particularly racist. Particularly as he's half Persian anyway. But I don't know. I don't see the advantage to us, and when I say us, I mean us generally on the right, of getting in arguments with each other. All it does is help our enemies, like our real enemies on the left and the corporate globalists like Alexander Johnson, etc. And I don't like those people at all. Like I'll support AA rather than Alexander Johnson or someone on the left every single time.
Okay, but like here's one of the big issues, right? So Hound of Ulster said, "Who are the Tory boys?" That's a good question. No one knows. It's basically anyone that takes the piss out of AA at any point or disagrees with him on anything. He says that so Royal Oak is one.
Listen, I always used to take the mickey because the Royal Oak comes on these streams reasonably often when he's not working. I think he's probably working, right? But like when Royal Oak used to come on these streams quite regularly, and I used to take the mickey out of him by calling him our semi-Tory boy, because he's not really.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. But here's the thing, though. Like AA said, Lady of Charlotte also just said a group of alleged right-wingers on Twitter that really upset AA by mocking Evola in a childish way. But this actually goes back to the Euros, right? And because I think that's when he first started using the term quite heavily.
Back even further.
Yeah.
So this big I've followed AA for a long time, ever since, I don't know, UO, probably in the single digits. I've never given him, overtly given him money, but I've always, sat through all the ads and whatever, and I know there's some revenue through that. But fine, I don't expect anyone to give me money on my YouTube either, so I don't feel like I'm being particularly hypocritical there. But I've generally enjoyed a lot of what he's put out. I don't, he does some very, very good videos, very informative. I don't have a problem with any of that. But the man has got very thin skin. He's very unable to take any criticism, however constructively put it might be. And what happened is, I don't know, about a couple of months before the Euros, I think, one of the supposed Tory boys, who, by the way, has never been a member of the Tory party and has probably voted Conservative about as often as AA has, basically made a comment that he didn't understand the jargon that was being used in AA's latest vernacular, and AA was quite barbed about it and said, "Well, I made a stream about it last night," and the chap just said, "Well, am I meant to have watched your stream the minute it comes out, or and it's kind of snowballed from there, and it's just gotten utterly ridiculous to the point where Harry, and bless him, made a little, what was quite a funny joke about Evola, and what was obviously enjoyed by a number of AA's quote unquote friends, as he calls them in his stream, discussing the issue. So it's obviously a sentiment that's shared within his community by a number of people that basically some things are funny and you can have a bit of a laugh about them and not, have a breakdown. And I get your point, Iron Duke, that it's his living, and I've always been very clear that regardless of how I feel he's behaving of late, it was never right that he lost his job because of some YouTube stuff or whatever. It's just totally wrong.
Yeah,
I would just say to Lady Schlight in the chat here. Look, I know Royal Oak. I know him a bit. I know him online, obviously, because I'm in Australia and he's in the UK. But Royal Oak has been on my streams several times, and I would not really describe him as a Tory boy. Does he have some old-fashioned conservative values? Yes, I think he does. Is he as right-wing as I am? No, I don't think he is. But I wouldn't really call him a Tory boy. I used to call him our semi-Tory boy, which I think is more accurate, to be honest.
And this is kind of the reason why a number of the Tory, quote unquote Tory boys, are involved in something called the Wellington Project, which is, you know, a small acorn at the minute, but it's a selection of people across a spectrum of the right, from, you know, people that are kind of party loyal in the form of Owain up to sort of total ANCAPs in the form of British Knight. And, you know, we recognise that we each have shared values. You know, we're all fairly culturally conservative.
Well, I'm a big fan of people like Shinobi Yaka, for example.
Shinobi's great.
I've followed Shinobi for years, and like Shinobi, I know streams with Harrion, for example, on his stream, which is like Welsh and Scottish stuff and what have you. Can't remember what it's called now. And
regional variations,
which I often watch, which is actually generally a pretty good stream. And I also I like people like what's his name, the XRF chap who's on your Discord, mate. Who streams with the British, who I don't like at all. I don't like the British one little tiny bit, to be honest.
you mean Mark? Not so obvious.
Yeah, not so obvious, Mark.
Oh yeah.
But I quite like Mark. I think he's a pretty good guy. He's done some good
Mark's
stuff.
good lad. Yep.
He's done some good stuff on
the
grooming gangs and things like that.
Most of us have all got something to contribute, and I'm not going to be a gatekeeper that says, "Oh no, you can't be in the community because you differ on this one particular point or this one particular subject." But it does seem like some people are intent to behave like that, and you know, that's fine, that's their choice, but it's very difficult to be an ally with a person like that.
But my point I was trying to make there, John, was that, like, not so obvious, for example, Mark went to the event and was one of the speakers at the event. So, you know, I just think that this argument that's going on at the moment is doing no one any favors except our enemies.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Right, but the
we
thing
spend
is,
more time fighting each other, and there's just I get where AA is coming from. Friend enemy distinction, all that kind of stuff. I understand, like, how he might feel that Harriet poking fun with a meme is counterproductive, but I think it only becomes counterproductive when you make it become counterproductive. And Evola isn't a protected character. He's not God.
No, but I tell you what I think happened. All right, this is just me. I don't know this for a fact, but what I think happened is that Harrian's meme about Evola, AA took to be supporting those two vile American bugmen who did that stream about it.
Oh, PSA Sitch and
yeah, and I detest those two. I wouldn't.
Adam Friended or something.
Yeah, Adam Friended. I wouldn't piss on those two if they were on fire. I have to say, I wouldn't. So I think AA thought that was supporting those two, and if it was, then I agree with AA. To be honest with you.
Well, I mean, the thing is, though, like, so I've actually gone through like his actual videos critiquing the so-called Tory boys, right? And so his distinction is they haven't actually got to be a supporter of the Tory party. But what they have to be, when you boil it down, the two distinctions that stay is that they have to be nihilistic and they have to be counter-signaling the movement. The funny thing with that, though, is if you go and watch his recent video, the one that came out, you know, the most recent one on the Tory boys, this one that's kicked off all this drama, he says all this. He lays this out. He says, he goes on about something else, and then he comes back around and he's talking about like who you should be reading and who you shouldn't be reading or something. And he says that, oh, you know, besides Peter Hitchens, there's sort of no one writing anything decent now. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. By your distinction, Peter Hitchens is a Tory boy. Like, he's horrendously nihilistic.
Mhm.
and he does actually counter signal the right.
Yeah, hates Farage, hates Powell, like you said, Atom.
Yeah, all the
exactly right.
time.
Well, look, I mean, let's be honest. If AA was being absolutely like straight down the line, what's the correct term? If his philosophy was absolutely straight down the line, he wouldn't be mates with Saigon.
No.
Because, I mean, Saigon absolutely is a civnat. He is. I'm not a
Yeah.
civnat, but Saigon is.
Yeah, and I mean by AA's own distinction again, because Sargon can kind of counter signal the right sometimes as well, because he draws
does,
this very definite line, like someone like, let's say, some of the people associated with that group PA, who AA's had on his channel, Sargon really strongly draws a line at those guys, for various reasons that I don't.
Well, I draw a very strong line about PA, not like ordinary people who are supporters of PA, but the leadership of PA, like Mark Collette, for example. I mean, A, he's a Nazi larper, but B, I'm 99% certain he's somehow or other in the service of the British government, to be honest with you.
I mean,
that's my total view.
You talk about Nazi LARPing, but Evola was certainly a big fan of various elements,
for sure.
And there's been a lot of interest in Evola and Spengler and company, and I'm not entirely comfortable with where they're heading, and
it's more esotericism, admittedly, but you can still, like he kind of can optically slip through the net, in a way that, let's say, Carl Schmitt, who I really like, can't, and of course Evola can't either.
I don't know. The situation on the right at the moment is complicated, shall we say?
Well, the right isn't a real entity.
No, but the
I
one
maintain
way,
that
the one way it's not complicated is we have no power whatsoever. And the more that we argue with each other in public and fight each other in public, the only people who benefit from that are our real enemies. That's my view.
But it comes back to what you said a minute ago, Iron Duke, and that is that you have to laugh or you cry. And I get what you're saying about. I think he did tag in PSA Sitch and Adam Friended.
And fuck those two bug men. Fuck them. Excuse me.
I mean, I don't really know too much about them. I've had a few interactions with Adam Friended. I followed him for a while, and then well, not a while. I followed him very briefly, and then quickly unfollowed him because he's just an idiot, quite frankly.
I know. Listen, I thought it was funny because like they were slagging off Evola and saying, "Oh man, this guy's gay," and blah and blah and blah. And like Evola actually did fight in World War I in the Italian army. But then I watched an AA stream where you had Panama Hat saying, "Oh well, Evola didn't really fight in World War I because he was in the artillery, and all he did was sit on a hilltop and occasionally fire at the enemy." So I actually said in the chat,
what war has Panama Hat been involved in?
Yeah, I know, but the point is, what does Panama Hat think the artillery do in a war? Bayonet charges? I mean, it's like
everyone does a role. Well, people have made the same. Like Enoch Powell was very briefly the youngest ever brigadier in the British Army, and
yes, he was.
someone took that title from him not long after that. But he never saw frontline service. He was always in sort of planning and
wasn't his choice.
No, absolutely not. It wasn't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he had a phenomenal mind, and they put it to work in the kind of planning and administration. That's no less being involved in war. It's different. Definitely,
he volunteered, and the army put him where the army wanted him.
Exactly. Not only did he volunteer,
wasn't able to change that.
Not only did he volunteer, he basically fled Australia in the night and signed up in England as an Australian, because England at that time, that was the quickest way, was to sign up as a member of the colonies rather than as an Englishman. That was the quickest way you were going to get to basic training.
Comment from the chat here, Steve. Artillery are combat arms. They come under fire from counter-battery artillery fire. They do, and actually on that stream where Panama Hat was going on about Evelyn wasn't really a soldier, I pointed out, like, one of my great uncles was killed in North Africa by German counter-battery fire while serving in the Royal Artillery. Trust me, that's combat. They didn't find enough of him to put in a shoebox. You know, it's the Royal Artillery is a combat arm. It really is. But yeah, I just think there's a lot of misunderstanding going around. I think, in general, I do believe in the don't punch right thing.
Yeah,
with
the problem is,
with the single exception of Nazi LARPers and people who are probably federal types.
the problem is that a lot of the people that espouse the don't punch right thing, what they really mean is don't punch me. They're more than happy to generally punch whoever they feel like is fair game, and AA is no different to that. I'm sorry, I'll call it as I see it. Like,
all right,
I'd be quite happy to let the whole thing drop and just move on, but he keeps dragging us all back into it because it's good for his numbers, and his audience love a good fight. So
yeah, but I think like, I'm happy to address this because I feel like I'm kind of in the middle of this. Like I am to the right of Harriet. I don't totally agree with AA, but I mean, AA makes a lot of very good points, and he also makes a lot of good content. And the people who are, shall we say, around his orbit also make very good content. So I'd like to try and, how can I describe it? Stop the argument if I can. I mean, I can't, of course. It's just a tiny little channel. But I'd like to put up a common sense view, shall we say. But having said that, I'd like to know what Adam and Ozzy think about this, who are two chaps who I respect.
Ozzy, because he wanted to talk about this anyway.
Yeah, I've been taciturn on the subject because I basically have like a lot of things going on in my brain when I think about what AA's been doing. And the first thing that immediately strikes home to me is his position of responsibility. AA, whether he chose to or not, is given, the denizens of his channel numbers some 65,000, and for better or for worse, I argue for worse, he is viewed as a philosophical leader for British right-wing politics, at least online. I consider his behavior to be nothing short of childish and petulant. I went to, as people may know, I went to boarding school, and people made fun of me all the time. I made fun of people all the time. People make fun of each other. It's what happens. It is a part of being a man and part of being a civilized human being that you come to accept that people are naturally going to have vicissitudes about them and are going to be hostile and make fun of things, etc., etc. His response and his behavior of banning his friends from making fun of an Italian fascist, or whatever he is,
super fascist in his own words,
is laughable. And he said, he whined, like, I remember him on the day basically saying, I set up all these live streams and everyone was making fun of me with his roller for it. And all I can think is, Jesus Christ, buddy, like, it's not like you're not being forced to go down a mine shaft. And this guy is, for better or for worse, again, he is guiding a lot of people with political views and moral guidance, which I somewhat lament. But that he then, after being made fun of by a few people, goes and blocks them. I mean, if it's very bad reflection, very bad example making. The other point that I really wanted to hammer home is that and I really don't care like if people consider this off topic, but I think Evola is just like so lame and so esoteric. Like, ooh, he talks about magic. Okay, and like here's the thing, like I'm not saying that philosophy is completely redundant. I sort of am, but like for me personally, like there are material obvious concerns that need to be addressed without talking about like things like Faustian spirits. Um and in fact this actually leads on to other things, talking about other people. So for example, Richard Spencer, or just go ahead and say his name, did a live stream on Politically Provoked, which I am in their Discord, and he basically said, "Oh, bro, we should totally like do abortions for eugenic purposes." Now, whether you guys like it or not, whether anyone likes it or not, we are associated with him. I hate it. I think he's a disgusting man, but unfortunately, that's what it is.
He's probably a Fed too, to be honest.
Oh yeah, he's a Fed, and I almost suspect he's a butt pirate too. But
yes, well, we're going to get on to that in a minute. But yeah, our ringleaders are either saying, "Oh yeah, bro, we should do abortion for eugenic purposes," or B, basically crying because people made fun of your favorite comic book character, is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And so, don't punch right, don't punch right. No, I am going to punch right, because I don't punch in directions. I punch at things I find stupid. I think maybe the answer is not so much, is more not punch right, but let's, can we maybe like make the arguments a little bit more intellectual? Rather than simply punching. So rather than doing a meme and then sending it off to people who are certainly not our friends because they're bugmen, maybe we should like make a video or do a stream and talk about this stuff rather than like sending off memes and then like sending them to people who are our enemies.
Well,
that would be my argument.
Well, again, here's the thing: the AA in particular is not a very good debater, and this is known.
He's not. No,
this is why he refuses to do a stream. And for people who want to see, way back in the archives, there is a debate between AA and a Marxist on someone other's channel, and in which he says, "I've read all 3 books of Capital." Now, here's the thing: Capital by Marx is impenetrable. I cannot read it. I hate it. It's a disgustingly.
I read it, and it's a vile book. It's along the lines of Mein Kampf. Like, I've read Mein Kampf, but I wish I really hadn't.
They're just unreadable, boring tones.
Utterly boring. Yeah.
But he was going up against a very experienced Marxist who said, "Well, what do you know about this, and this concept?" And it basically turned out that AA was full of shit. He had no idea what he was talking about. And so, to that end, it's kind of obvious why he won't go on and debate these people. And that's fine, I'm not.
Yeah, but I have to be fair here, Ozzy. Okay, and like I like AA more than I dislike it. I have to say. And like I've followed him for a long time now, although I did stop following for a long time because he was too left wing for me at one stage. But I like him more than I dislike him now. And I will just say I wouldn't debate those 2 bugmen who did that stream about Evola. I just wouldn't, because they're leftists, and leftists will not debate you honestly ever. I mean, I've seen people like Dave the Distributist, for example, get pissed off, get buggered up in a debate with leftists because the leftists will never debate you honestly.
It's for me, it's not so much about winning or the honesty of it. It's more about the fact that You need to show. It's helpful to show audiences that there is a way of thinking that they are not necessarily exposed to. I know that sounds cringy, but it is genuinely true. And like some of the most interesting points and pieces of knowledge I've come from have actually been from things like blood sports. So I'm not denying that that it's kind of that you won't convince them. That's not going to happen. But it's a helpful thing to just show that there is a point of opposition. And if we're going to talk about that, then while we're here, AA's video about Zoomers are Kumas, I find relatively morally askew.
I've got something to say about that in a bit, Ozzy. So we will move on to that in due course.
Okay, right.
Let me just ask, Adam, what's your view of this whole argument, etc.?
Wait, which argument are we talking about specifically?
The one between AA and Harrion and all this stuff.
Oh, okay. So we're still on. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I've said my piece on it already. Basically, I did notice, and there's a couple of things that came up about it on the chat, which I thought we should address, but I can't see them now. Okay, so yeah, Chris O'Hanlon said a little while ago. O'Hanlon. He's gone to Evola, etc., because he's accepted that we've been completely defeated. Now, yeah, but he also like he seems to say he accepts it, but then the fact that he would actually engage with someone like Adam and Sit shows that actually he doesn't. Or I would say. That's his revealed preference, you could say.
It's like that hilarious argument, like the best argument against nihilism is to kill the nihilist because they theoretically shouldn't care at all.
Yeah.
Well, look.
And so he obviously he still thinks that there's a way of reaching out and growing and doing something. He's still got a streak of optimism in him somewhere. I mean, I also thought it was kind of funny in that original argument he had between like him and Sitch and Adam. I mean, so I think Lady of Shalott brought up about the distributist, and actually the distributist has kind of done them in twice now because he argued with Adam on his own stream, and he done really well. And
I'm a big fan of Dave the Distributist. He's probably my favorite American YouTuber. And after him, I like Don the Pleb, strange to say, but there we go. But I also like people like Charlemagne, etc., and that very, very young American chap. What's his name? What does he call himself?
Turnip,
yeah. Very, very young chap who I suspect might be a bit hard work if you met him in real life, because like I don't know who he is, but he's probably like 18 or something like that.
They're all super autists.
I was just about to say that. So oh yeah, here's the other thing as well. So I think we should address this too, because Judge Caligula Bushman said, well, do stay on the facts then. Evola's super fascist point was meant as being above fascism. Yeah, see, I've heard this. Because he said I'm a super fascist, and if you kind of translate that from Italian, it kind of means over fascism, or above fascism.
Yeah.
Well, it can be translated as supra-fascist, which would mean the over or above. But yeah,
and he did say this at a time when he was writing a lot of critiques of fascism.
But again, you have to bear in mind, like he was very keen to associate with and work with the SD and things like that. So and very close to Himmler as well, from what I understand.
Yeah, he was a bit close to Himmler.
So it's kind of it's a bit all over the place. He's a very sort of mixed bag individual.
All right, let me just say this about Evola. I know I've said it several times now, but let me say it more publicly. I think Evola and Aleister Crowley would have got on okay because they were both mountaineers. They were both into mind-altering drugs at one stage. They were both into magic.
That's probably half the problem.
Yeah, but
I
I just feel that, you know, AA would not be doing streams about Aleister Crowley, who may or may not have been a
No,
British
indeed.
agent, by the way. So, you know.
I do find it interesting that AA has curated himself quite a sort of. He's got quite a lot of religious viewers, let's say, particularly Catholics, I understand.
Yes.
And I don't understand how they square that circle because the Bible cautions very heavily, and that's probably putting it mildly against magic, things like that. Kill the witch wherever you find them springs to mind. Yeah, I don't understand how the Catholics in his circle are kind of getting on with all the esotericism, the magic kind of stuff. And to be clear, there's plenty of magic going on in the Bible. You know, the Pharaoh's magicians who turn their staffs into snakes, and then
the parting of the Red Sea.
Yeah,
miracles all over the place.
Okay, theological spurgery moment. Okay, so you can bifurcate those things into acts of God, which are not considered magic; they're considered acts of divinity.
Not so. The thing I specifically referred to was the magic. The Pharaoh's magicians,
and then that sort of stuff, which of course is occult and generally considered satanic.
Which is exactly where I think you would perceive Evola to be coming from. I mean, it is literally the occult, right?
That's pushing it. Hang on, that's pushing it a bit. But I do still think that, like Evola and Aleister Crowley, they could have been mates. They had so much in common. But
no
one on the right is going to be pushing Aleister Crowley.
If they could have been mates, I would argue that's another good reason why Christians should be giving it a wide berth, if you ask me. But that's there.
I guess we're moving into this a little bit. This is going to be a fairly controversial stream, people. Look, how, if you're on the right, and how, if you're a traditional Catholic, or a self-described traditional Catholic, do you support the likes of Grinder Greg Johnson, who, without any doubt whatsoever, is a borderline gay pedo?
You don't. The part of the problem I've got with AA is I'm sure he brought up sodomy, or one of his close followers brought up sodomy the other day, and I just looked and thought, you stream with a homosexual and you regularly stream with a transgender person who's engaged in a polyamorous three-way relationship.
I mean,
another transsexual and a bloke. So
I mean, I would pull Mr. D, because Mr. D is a repentant, and he says that he's, and that's kind of important.
I've seen.
All right, hang on, guys.
I won't go into too much detail.
Listen, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is my stream. And all this shit that gets spoken on this stream is going to come back to me, I'm sure. So let me be.
All my views are my own.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone, we're all adults, but the point is, this is my stream, and the way the internet works is anything that is said on here that other people don't like will come back to me. So let me make myself very clear. I do not have a great problem with gay people. Right, I don't think it should be front and center. I don't believe in gay pride parades at all. I think what people do in private with adults is their own business, providing it's not. But hang on, let me finish. Providing it is not the main thing about them. I don't have a big problem with someone like Douglas Murray because he's gay. I have problems with him because he won't call some things out that he should. I don't have big problems with people like Dr. David Starkey because he's gay, because it's not the main thing about him. Providing what he does is in private with adults, I don't care. My problem with people like Grinder Greg Johnson is that he has a well-deserved reputation, which many people know about, for going around the world chasing very young gay men, including blokes on the right who may or may not have been gay when he was chasing them. And I have a real issue with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's just a disgusting man in general.
Well, I on AA stream the other day, and to give AA his full due, he did read out my super chat. But I put a super chat on there asking Grinder Greg about, are you still chasing young men? And Grinder Greg immediately left the stream. Like he said, I'm tired and I have to go. Immediately, as soon as that super chat came up. But to give AA his due, and I do like AA on the whole, AA did read out my super chat and said, well, I can't ask him because he's left. So there you go. But
so again, Andrew, I'm broadly aligned. I don't believe the state should be involved in what consenting adults get up to in the bedroom. I think if people want to have, relations with the same gender, that's their lookout. I'm a Christian. I know what the Bible says. It's not for me, but if that's something God doesn't like, God's going to sort it out at the end of the day. He's told me to judge righteousness, but he's also told me to judge not lest I be judged.
Yeah,
and
the
judgment ultimately is his. So I'm not gonna I might choose who I socialize with. What they choose to do in their own time is up to them. But equally, I'm not the one saying certain things are degenerate and then having the degenerate stuff in my space. So
we'll get on to that in a sec. But I mean, my point is, I don't have big problems with Mr. D. So far as I understand, like Mr. D is openly gay, but I don't think he's particularly involved with very young men. Okay, and he certainly has never said he is, and I see no reason why he would be. So, like, I don't care what he does in private, largely. So I don't have a problem with people like John D. But I do have a problem with people like Grinder Greg, who has a vile reputation amongst people who know him personally for traveling around the world and targeting very young men. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if a straight heterosexual guy did that with very young women, everyone on the right would say him off.
Yeah.
Probably rightly.
The only reason why I brought up any of what I brought up is more to do with the fact that a constant feature is talk about degeneracy, decline of the West, degeneracy in the West, and it's very juxtaposed with
I mean, like
the things I mentioned.
I accept that there are people who are homosexuals. That is a thing that happens, and I accept that they will do what they need to do. That's fine for me. What the line for me would be that you are, basically people who are mentally ill playing dress up, and AA has one of those on his stream, and that personally for me is morally questionable. I don't really know anything about Greg Johnson. He sounds like a pretty vile character. He made I know he's written some pretty terrible books, and I know he's had some disagreements with K-Mac in the past. I mean, for better or for worse, K-Mac writes some pretty good books. But what was I going to say? For me, the big thing and the big upset for me that has been of recent is not so much what AA's done in terms of who he talks to. It's been his softness. If you are an actual man of the right or tradition, you believe that men should be able to endure hardness. You should be able to take on some tough duties and just get on with it. You don't whine. You don't say, "Wow, it's not very nice." Maybe you throw some shit back at the people who threw shit at you, sure, but like, you do not basically go, "You ruined my day," and Academic Agent basically pulled the pantomime of "You ruined my day," and it's like, do I really want this guy to be associated with the top of, right-wing ethical values? No. The guy is,
I
for
think that's
someone who is a father, someone who's married and a father.
That's a bit unfair. I think, Ozzy.
There
to
were
be
people
honest.
in his own comment section who were like, "Dude, you sound like you've been crying."
I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
Duke.
I see what you're saying. I just think that's probably a step too far, to be honest.
I don't think it's a step, because if you're like, okay, so if you have a friend who basically says, "Dude, what I think you're doing is really dumb," then you can say, "Okay, cool. You can shut the hell up. I don't really care." Or you can basically say, "That's really interesting, bro. We can discuss this at some other point. Can you?" And then, like, maybe you can throw shit back at them or whatever. You do not go and systemically block them on Twitter.
Yeah.
That is that is something teenage girls do. That is not something that a father and
okay. No, that I'll agree with. Yeah, no, I have to agree with that. Yeah. No, I have to agree with that, Ozzy.
Yeah.
Adamant, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, Chris O'Hanlon just said in the chat, we're all flawed. Yeah, I mean, yeah, AA kind of is hit or miss. He might come back in a couple of weeks' time and be a bit more resilient and put out some good content, and then he'll probably slip back into this and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, he does go through these sort of big phases. Evola. I mean, he's been reading Evola for a long time, I know, but even this seems to be a bit of a phase. He sort of brought it up, he's got really into it, and he's probably going to drop it again in a couple of weeks, and then pick it up again in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I look. My view on this is twofold. If you're going to be AA and you're going to go on about anime, for fuck's sake, which is like Japanese cartoons, and go on about them a lot, as he did at one stage, and say that's some sort of pipeline to being gay, or
well, it probably is, to be
fair. Maybe it is. I don't know.
I would like to point out that in my youth, I occasionally indulged in anime, and I turned out perfectly fine.
Sinner, burn him.
No, hang on. Look, I also think there's a difference between anime and hentai, but there we go. But leaving all that aside, if you're going to do that as AA, then if you're going to have like at least 2 transvestites on your channel all the time, I have a difficulty with that. I just do. I'm sorry.
I mean, can I say, I would really like to leave talking about AA alone. I mean, I just want to say my final piece on the subject, which is that I think he puts out some incredibly good content.
Yes, he does.
I happen to be one of these people. He's determined as a Tory boy. That's fine. It doesn't hurt me in the slightest. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and if we go our separate ways, we go our separate ways. I think he's an academic, and so as part of that, he kind of involves himself in learning about and discussing stuff that maybe isn't front and center, and sometimes that's great, and other times I'm less interested in what he's currently researching at the minute. I would say his problem is that he gets incredibly obsessed about whatever it is that he's currently learning about, and I think people need to bear that in mind when they're consuming his content, to make sure they don't fall into the same rabbit hole. Some of his comment section increasingly looks like a cult following, which I have some concerns about, but that's for him and them to manage, and I wish him all the best in whatever he wants to do.
All right, John, are you a big supporter of Alexander Johnson and the current Conservative Party government?
Well, if you're asking me, did I vote for them? Yes, because I was very keen to get Brexit over the line.
Yeah, so did I.
If you're talking about in terms of anything else, no, not really.
No, because honestly, mate, the only reason you're in my Discord is that you're not. If you were, you wouldn't be in my Discord. Trust me.
I think there are some good people in government, and I don't think whoever's in government.
In government, maybe.
Okay, in Parliament.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, if you think there are a few decent Conservative MPs, but not many.
I think there's more than a few, but I think the problem they've got is that they're part of a wider party. I also think that you don't necessarily need to agree with all of my positions to be a good MP, because I think we often fall down the trap of thinking that, well, unless you agree with everything I think, you can't possibly be, a good politician or a good YouTuber or whatever. I think
it's kind of what we're doing. It's kind of what we're talking about at the moment, I guess.
Well, part of the tapestry of life is learning how to interact with people. That we're not all backwoodsmen, right?
No.
We all have to interact with each other on a daily basis, and we need to find some kind of common ground in order to, function as a society that we are. I mean, people may not like the fact we live in a society, but we do.
But we live in a society where the real right, which I'm
sorry. I'm so
we live
sorry.
In a society.
No. Hang on. Yeah, right. You can be,
we live in a society, you guys.
Ozzy, you can have 10 minutes in a minute. All I would say is this: we do kind of live in a society, but also we live in a society where us on the real right have no power whatsoever. And beating each other up is just like helping our enemies. Honest, it is.
Well, this is why I say it's like I have no interest in, am I never going to poke fun on occasion? No, because I'm a human being and sometimes I find things funny, but, do I despise the man or hate him? No, I think he's got a few contradictions. I don't understand how that doesn't bother some of his audience, but that's their watch out. I really don't care.
Adam, what do you reckon, mate?
I think I've said enough on this topic. I think I've covered all my positions on this.
Go on, then, Ozzy, you were like, sorry, carry on.
No, carry on.
Ozzy, what were you going to say? Because you wanted to say.
We live in a society. That's all I had to say.
I love dropping that in because that always gets people.
I totally fucked society, but
Sorry, but you guys said it like 6 times without not acknowledging it. I can't help myself.
I intentionally acknowledge it. I use it totally unironically.
All right. Okay, we're going to address some of the chat now. The English law list is a purity spiral. Well, only if transvestites are part of a purity spiral, in my opinion. But there we go. That's just me. It's only what I think. Like, I worry when you have an event, and I wasn't at all anti the event, but when you have an event where the most femininely dressed person there is a bloke pretending to be a woman, to me, there is a problem with your society. But, it's just me.
Mm.
I mean, what do you guys think?
Even Che Guevara had some base takes on occasion.
I mean, look, if you're going to go on about anime, and you're going to go on about Kumas, and you're going to go, I agreed with AA totally about that chick with the abs. Totally agreed with him. Like, women shouldn't have abs.
Not a feminine trait. Yeah.
No, it's not at all. But if you're going to do those things, but you're still going to have at least 2 transvestites on your show, I'm sorry. Like, there's a hypocrisy level there. There is.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
And then you're going to have on Greg Johnson, who is infamous for chasing very young men all over the world, including young men on the right, and grooming them and then presumably buggering them. So, like, I have a problem with that too. But
We live in a society.
Yeah, we live in a society. We live in a sick society, yes, but I mean, should we support that sick society? And at the same time, you're going to slag off people like Harrion. And look, Harrion is way to the left of me. He is. If I went on a stream with Harrion, I reckon I'd have big arguments with him about many things. But do you know what? If I went on a stream with Sargon of Akkad, I'd have enormous arguments with him. And I reckon Sargon of Akkad is actually probably more left-wing than Harrion is.
Actually,
I'd say Sargon and Harrion were pretty well aligned, to be honest.
Yeah, and they're both way to the left of me.
I'm actually having a growing suspicion that Sargon is becoming more based than he lets on.
Yeah, no, he is. He has been moving gradually to the right for a long time, but he's still. And also, that's where his income is. Don't forget. But I mean, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Mango in the chat. AA blocked me on Twitter because he asked for hard figures on something. So I sent him that woman with the abs pic. Brilliant. But
Yeah,
there's, AA.
I saw quite a lot of people moaning about AA banning Mango, by the way.
Well, I on the subject of hypocrisy, if you have a problem with women with abs, I think it quite strange to pick a clickbaity woman with abs picture for your stream. It's not something I do.
I do have a problem with women with abs, and I have an even bigger problem with blokes who like women with abs. But I'm basically I'm pretty trad in that regard. But I had a really big problem with a self-proclaimed traditional Catholic supporting Gregory Johnson. How do you do that?
Wait,
who's the traditional Catholic?
Columba.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I thought you mentioned. I thought you talked about AA, and I was like, I'm pretty sure he's not a trad Cath. But
no, AA isn't. Of course, he's not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure AA is a Christian, let alone a Catholic.
Look, okay, I'm gonna put my tone the scorching hot sand here and say that, women with 8-packs is completely unnatural and ridiculous, but I actually kind of like athletic women.
Kick him. That's worse than we live in a society.
No, you gotta be careful there, Ozzy.
I'm sorry, but you see some of those girls in the
Olympics, Duke, I didn't know you had homosexuals on your stream. What's going on?
Shut up.
Yeah, I know this is bad.
Look, okay, toe dipped in the fire and the fire bit back. But I'm not really I'm not saying that I expect 8-pack women. I think that's fucking ridiculously gross. But the women who play in the Olympics, I think they're kind of cute, to be honest. I think a lot of the girls who play tennis are gorgeous. But I
don't think there should be women in the Olympics.
Yeah, but that's cool
story, bro. Cool story.
I don't like fat women at all. If you do,
yeah, no shit.
That's really.
Hold on. When does it cease? When does it cease becoming? When does it cease being childbearing, extra padding into fat? Because is that a fine line or a broad line?
It depends on the height of the woman and all this kind of stuff. But women should have a gently rounded belly. Is the truth. They're not athletic. They shouldn't be athletic, but they shouldn't be fat either. That's my honest view. And fat women, no, never.
Okay, right. Another toe dip in the sand thing. When you guys were at school,
don't do it.
Did you not think that the prettiest women also coincidentally also happen to be the most sporty.
Yeah.
I did like netball players when I was at school, I have to say, yeah.
I'm sorry, but like physical fitness and athleticism are classic signatures of health.
But they also had to have the classic hourglass.
Okay, sure.
Power line. Yeah.
Sure.
Iron Duke
So-
was
so
only
long as you do
interested if
that.
they had to wear a sports bra.
Sure, but like, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. They had to wear a sports bra. Although, actually, I preferred it when they didn't because it was more better. But yeah, okay. Yeah, for sure. But like, men and women are not the same. Men and women are complementary. This is the whole point, and this is everything that we on the right should be saying. Is like men and women are not better or worse than each other. They are complementary, but they are in no way, shape, or form the same.
I mean, like, I don't want people to misconstrue me in which I say, like, you know, my ideal girlfriend is like some incredible Hulk.
I hope not. I hope not, Ozzy. You'd get kicked. You'd get kicked. You'd get kicked.
I would expect nothing less. And I am definitely not that fish character that's licking the woman's abs. I think that's I think that's pathetic. And you know, it's all, you know, the man is not meant to be in a supplicatory position.
Ever.
But yeah, ever. But I think and in fact, actually, that's actually quite something I've noticed recently. In things like where people like announce their weddings and things like that, you know, it's normally the woman in front showing her wedding ring to the camera. And what it should actually be is it should be the man standing in front of the woman, and then, like, you know, you see the ring in the background. The idea is that
this is my beautiful bride. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is a matter of possession and pride. That being said, I genuinely believe that physical fitness and athleticism are attractive qualities. You can attack me for that and say I'm a Kuma or whatever, but like, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just to me that's perfectly normal to like healthy.
Ozzy, I have to ask
I
you
think
this. Ozzy, I have to ask you this. Like, and we spoke about this a bit earlier. You are becoming increasingly Scottish sounding. and
Yeah,
like,
you moved away.
when I first knew you, you had this absolute British public school accent, and you seem to be losing it. It's funny.
Here's the thing. It comes and goes. When I'm around my family more, I mean, I'd spent a long time away from my father before lockdown, and I developed a sort of a more Broadlands accent. And I remember coming home, and he says to me, "Wow, my name. You were brought up to go to a." Now he's got a Cockney accent for some reason. He said, you went to a nice British school, good public school, and I expect you to have a proper erudite accent. And so, and so when I'm around my family, I typically talk a bit more like this. But alas, I've been away from my family for more than 2 months now, so things seem to go more stochastic. But
it doesn't matter. I mean, look, Scottish accents are great. I got no problem with Scottish accents, but it's quite interesting because you used to have this very terribly public school accent, and you're becoming more Scots. It's quite funny, actually.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, I went to public school, so I have a silver spoon up my ass, and that will occasionally
I don't
show.
think that's where it's meant to be.
No, it's not meant to be there.
Is that what happened at public school, is it?
I'm afraid it is. They like to rearrange a few things.
I've got a stream you might want to go on. I'll get AA to invite you.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about things like fagging at Eton, but like there are other things that go on too.
Oh, jeez.
For sure.
A public school meaning private school for Australians in the stream. Yeah, yeah, it's a very esoteric. Private schools are not necessarily public schools, but public schools are necessarily private schools. It's a very
my son went to a school well known for getting people into the Royal Navy in East Anglia, shall we say, and eventually
Did it work?
Yeah, well, yeah, he's an officer in the Royal Navy, but he eventually asked me, could I become a boarder when he was old enough? I wouldn't have let him do that when he was like 12 at all, but like when he asked me when he was older, I said, yeah, sure, if you want.
I'm sorry if I've been chuckling. Mango says that I'm familiar with the soggiest of biscuits. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, the most common thing that would happen, and this is just classic boarding school behavior, is that while you were asleep, people would sneak into your bedroom and they would flip your mattress upside down. So it's the middle of the morning, and all of a sudden your face splats into the bottom of the bedside.
Boys will be boys. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. Oh, it's great. Those are the days.
I imagine that behaviour is very frowned upon, especially these days.
Well, actually, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, and it's perhaps a bit more political as a streamer is political. I remember in my year leaving, the lowest sixth, who is the year below the final year, was saying, "Oh, by the way, they're bringing in all boys now have to go into a female etiquette thing in which they have to learn about like what it like, you know, gender equality and like when it, and that you need to treat women like blah 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 blah." And I remember thinking, holy shit, this is the death of the public school, because the same day during we have chapel, we don't have assembly, we had chapel, they had announced that there was going to be an equalities week, and the person started talking about cultural appropriation. So yeah, it's everywhere.
I'm pretty sure, guys, in the chat here, that eventually Ozzy will marry some extremely beautiful Greek or Italian woman, and I think that's partly why he's in the church he is in. But that's just me.
Gentlemen never tell, dear boy.
Absolutely, we never do. We never say a word. But yeah, I just think, because we're going to finish shortly, I don't see the point of all this terrible bloody arguing between people on the right, and I think it just helps our enemies. And AA is not our enemy at all. Harrion, I don't think he's our enemy really, although he's a lot left of me. But I just think we should not be doing this, because all we're doing is we are helping our enemies on the left and in the corporate globalist world of Alexander Johnson and his watermelon green bollocks. So I think we should stop it. That's my final view, and I'll just ask you guys, what do you think about that stuff?
We're all being too polite. Who's gonna jump in first?
Well, you clearly jumped in first, so go ahead. Check.
I don't believe the right is a real thing. I think there's quite a lot of different views that get labelled as right.
But it needs to be the right, John. It needs to be.
I think part of the problem of doing that is it means that people don't explore. That they're all too busy gatekeeping each other and don't explore what you know is really important to them. And part of what you're talking about in terms of arguing, let's be clear, is just gatekeeping. AA is gatekeeping his community. You know, he'd probably argue we were gatekeeping ours, and you know that's fine for him to say that. I just think sometimes Yeah, there's a lot of drama over nothing really. Like having been on the receiving end of some of his ire for actually nothing other than being associated with Harry, and for example, it's just petty and pathetic, and I'd quite like to just ignore each other, to be quite honest.
Mr. X, Sibnats and racial right-wingers never go along. There is no way that AA is a racial right-winger. He can't be. He's half Persian.
I think he likes to pretend he is, but
I mean,
sometimes, yeah.
I would like. I
He's
mean,
certainly curated an audience. That is.
he certainly has his prejudices. Now, I remember him making some videos about a certain group of very prominent, a very prominent ethnic group. How about that? He's made videos like that, and like he certainly has his prejudices. I mean, I'd wager he's probably more prejudiced than I am. Because I mean, honestly, I don't really care. Especially about that sort of esoteric, certain ethnicity crap. My main interest is that Britain doesn't, stays British. That's basically the long and the short of it. He seems to have some actual racial pathologies, and that's kind of concerning to me. But hey, I guess I'm a Sibnet.
Adam, what do you think?
Well, not to diverge, but another thing that kind of came out of this whole mess was watching him try to make an argument that could be absorbed by Adam and Sitch. I think when we last had Royal Oak on, me and Royal Oak were both talking, and we said that we both actually watch Adam and Sitch, but kind of as a way of being grounded and seeing where the sort of moderates are.
Yep.
But they, like, one of the other problems with a lot of this traditionalist theory is, and I saw someone say this in concern with the distributors talking to them as well. They said he was trying to condense 10 years of NRX theory into sort of a 10-minute digestible sort of soundbite, and it can't really be done. And there's almost an aspect to which, especially the sort of right that AA is trying to construct is very it's increasingly separated from the sort of the masses out there, as it were. And I'm just not entirely sure still what it is he's aiming for. 1 minute he's saying that we don't need to red pill people. We've got everyone we need. Blah 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 blah. And then the next minute he's still trying to reach out and bring in new people, bring in fresh blood.
Yeah,
So
I'm perfectly fair.
It turns out you can't be a man among the ruins if you need financial income, right? That's what it
Yeah.
Yeah, and listen, I laughed about that because it's funny, but as I said earlier, I'm one of the people, and you can see on any AA stream you watch, that I'm a Patreon of his channel. But yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. But again, my problem with AA would be far less if he didn't support transvestites.
That's the crux of this.
Yeah, and people like Grinder Greg Johnson.
Right, but what's the issue with Greg? Because I didn't like I find him to be quite anti-Christian at times. But I don't know much about him beyond that.
All right, Adam, and if you follow Affirmative Right, the website, which was started by Colin Liddell.
Yeah.
And like to full disclosure here, I've streamed with Colin 3 times, and I will no doubt again in the future. Colin was one of the founders of the old alt-right, but he eventually fell out with the likes of Grinder Greg and what's his name, that American bloody idiot. Spencer. He eventually fell out with these people because they were just so pro Austrian painter, shall we say. And that was obviously like gonna do our movement in, as it always will, in Western English-speaking nations. And he pointed out, he knows Grinder Greg, he knows him personally. And Greg Johnson has a reputation for going around the world, attaching him. He's a gay guy, but I don't care that he's a gay guy. What I do care about is that he has a reputation for going around the world, grooming very young gay guys, including very young, maybe gay guys on the right, if you see what I mean. And I reckon, were he a
if they're gay, is that grooming, or is that just looking for dates?
I listen. I tell you what I think about that, John. If a straight white man did that to very young women on the right, I reckon everyone would slag them off. Don't you?
What, a bit like Pride and Prejudice?
Yeah, everyone would slag.
Because this is a weird thing. We seem to have a really massive aversion against sort of like landed middle-aged men dating young ladies, and
yeah, hang on.
I'm going to be honest. I don't understand it.
When you said Pride and Prejudice, I didn't realize you were talking about the book.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Like 200 years ago, maybe.
But why is that? Why is that a problem today? If that's the traditional thing that was done, why is that suddenly a problem today?
Okay, so I'm 56. If I went around trying to get a 20-year-old girl somewhere,
I mean, most of them probably wouldn't be interested. Let's be honest.
Most of them wouldn't. But if I did that, I think I'd be slagged off, wouldn't I?
Half your age
by the right.
Half your age plus 7. It's done.
But why? Again, I if she is, I mean, particularly if you're talking about a 20-year-old, she's, well over the age of consent by that point. She's an adult. She can make her own decisions. You Iron Duke might represent a good prospect. You may own some property, and you're financially sound, and
I'd be dead soon. And she'd inherit whatever little was left. But yeah, what Lady of Shalott in the chat says, unless I was a billionaire. You see, but there is the whole problem, right? If you're a billionaire, a 20-year-old chick can do that. But that's nonsense as well, isn't it? And I know that Lady of Shalott is a very based lady, and she knows that that's nonsense.
I mean, my personal perspective is that it's good that the man is generally older. I don't mean like ridiculous older, like 10 years, 20 years.
You're roboting a bit. Ozzy, you're roboting me.
I don't know what console now.
Try and
be quiet.
Jonathan Bowden says Duke only likes decorative women. Absolutely right. I've only ever liked decorative women.
Decoration and childbearing.
If you're not decorative, why on earth would I be anywhere around you if you're a woman? That's what women are for, basically.
I mean, I'd have a problem if he was going around, grooming straight young men and turning them gay. But if they're already gay already,
right, hang on. The point I would make, John, is that does a 17 or 18 or 19-year-old bloke really know? Some of them these days, especially, do they really know? Why is Ozzy trying to come on here twice? Oh, there he is.
He's dropped out.
Does a 17, 18 or 19-year-old chap really know what his sexuality is. I mean, I did, but these days I'm not sure.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you did, why is I mean, look. I'm a Christian, right? I think homosexuality is a sin, and I think it. Assuming God's real, assuming the Bible is real, then you're not going to have a fun time on the other side because.
Are you a Catholic, John?
I'm not a Catholic, no.
No, all right. See, this is another thing I have an issue with, which I might as well bring up because this is going to be a controversial stream, I guess. I don't understand how a traditional Catholic can support someone like Greg Johnson. I just don't. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I don't understand it either, to be quite frank. I mean, again, it's like you say, engaging with them on an individual level is one thing, though. That's, if assuming he's not talking about being homosexual and he's talking about something pertinent, that, unless you're telling me he's a paedophile or he's going around, hitting on boys that would otherwise be straight.
Borderline with Greg Johnson, if you ask me. Borderline. From people who know him, borderline.
Yeah, like I say, I think it's pretty odd behaviour, but I think it's pretty odd behaviour anyway, because, as far as I'm concerned, it's a one-way street, the back passage, but...
Yeah, indeed. Okay, look, we're going to go we're going to go 5 minutes now, just about. Anything to finish up with, gentlemen?
No, I think. Was there any subjects we've missed off? Well, I know we've gone on some massive tangents.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I think we have covered everything.
It's been a gossip stream, hasn't it? Really?
Yeah.
So.
the second
We've
half,
been like a bunch of elderly women, haven't we?
No, I don't think we have. I think we've been trying to talk about what is actually right wing. I mean, that's what I've been trying to talk about anyway. I mean, I don't think transvestites and borderline pedos are actually right wing. I just don't. I'm sorry.
What we've discovered.
Oh, well,
is
they're
that
certainly
right
not
is...
traditional right. I mean, they might be economically right wing. They're not. I wouldn't say they were conservative.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm not a conservative. I'm way to the right of the so-called, in inverted commas, conservative.
Oh,
right.
I'm talking about the. Oh, so sorry. Yeah. So So I guess on the 4 axis, you've got economically left and right, and then you've got authoritarianism, haven't you?
Well,
I'm not
a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat, guys. I'm not. I don't think democracy is a good system. I might support household democracy, maybe.
Oh, that's the worst kind.
See, households are communist. Households are communism. Is a commune.
No. When I say household democracy, I mean the father and head of the household does the voting, and that's it. But you have to have a certain property qualification. So
I'd be in favour of one vote per household, and it has to be an owned household.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
And
I might make an exception for people who had served in the armed forces, but that would be about my law.
See, I've almost come to the position where I'm entirely against voting, and I'd like to return to a sort of medieval monarch with his parliament. To be quite honest.
You guys are losing so much social credit points under the CCP. I mean, you should approve my social credit system.
Yeah, but how on earth are you ever going to get to that position? Listen, Hound of Ulster in the chat says, I don't even know who Greg is. I missed the stream. He's just some bloke Duke rants about. All right. Let me explain.
No. Just wind the stream back 10 minutes.
We're going to go down to the next 5 areas.
All right. Yep. Honestly, Hound of Ulster, go and check out Greg Johnson, and then go on the Affirmative Right website and check out Grindr Greg Johnson, and you'll have some idea of who I'm talking about. I'm not easy. He's not just somebody. It was funny because I watched the AA stream, and I went away for a while to watch someone else's stream because I can only take Greg Johnson in very small bites. And then I came back, and
I imagine that's what he likes his boyfriends to say as well.
Yeah, probably so. But I came back, and I made a super chat asking Greg if he was still chasing very young boys around the world. And Greg, at that exact point, I think it was like 25 seconds later, said to AA, I have to go now because I'm really tired. Although, to give AA is due, AA did read out my super chat and said, well, I can't ask him because he's already left. And my thing would be, well, why had he left? But there we go. That's just what I think. All right, guys, thanks very much. I think we've probably done enough now. I'm going to play us out with a tune because on the 25th in UK time, we are going to do an Agincourt stream, Agincourt Day, when 6,000 tired, war-weary English and Welshmen faced over 20,000 Frenchmen and absolutely destroyed them. So that's going to be our Agincourt Day stream. And the tune I'm going to play us out on is about that.
All right, bye, fellas.
Yep. See you later.
Ciao.
To Normandy with grace and might of chivalry, their God for him wrought marvelously. Wherefore England they call and cry. He set the siege to for to say, to Harcourt town with royal array. The town he won and made afraid, that France shall rule until doomsday. Deo gratias, Deo gratias, Anglia, Re de pro victoria. Then went our king with all his host, through France fight all the French did boast. He started neither least nor most, till he came to Agincourt coast. Then, forsooth, that comely knight in Agincourt field did manly fight. Through grace of God most mighty, he won both field and victory. Deo gratias, Deo gratias, Anglia, Re de pro victoria. Then dukes and earls, lord and baron, were taken, slain, and that well soon. And some were led into London with joy and mirth and great renown. Now, gracious God, he save our King, his people and all his good willing. Give him good life and good ending, that we with mirth may safely say. Deo gratias, Deo gratias, Anglia, Re de pro victoria. Our king went forth.
All right, gents. That was the Agincourt Carol, of which there are many versions. And on the... yeah, it is. Great. And on the 25th of October, we are going to do an Agincourt Day stream when Henry V, who was the first English king since Harold to speak English as his first language, led his highly professional English army of just under 6,000 men against a vast host of Frenchmen of 20,000 plus, and beat the shit out of them. So we're going to talk about that on the 25th. Thanks to my guests for coming on, and go well, everybody.